Okay, so this podcast is about the drawings for Chapter 6, or our discussion on body systems. So what I did here was wrote down the drawings that you need to be able to do for each section of Chapter 6. So 6.1.4 is draw and label diagram of the digestive system. I added a few notes of what you need to include in the drawings, or at least with the labels. And then here I added a note about the connections between some of those structures. 6.2.1 is draw, label, diagram of the heart, and then included some things that you need to be able to show, and another hint. 6.4.4, which is draw, label, and diagram of the ventilation system, and some other things, notes, and things to make sure you label. 6.5.2 is a diagram of the structure of a motor neuron, and 6.6.1, which is to draw and label a diagram of an adult male and female reproductive system. So let's go ahead and get started. What I went ahead and did in order to make this video relatively short was went ahead and drew my diagram of the digestive system. And I'm actually very proud of this drawing. So let me just add a couple labels here, because remember, IB, when IB says to draw, it actually means to draw and to label. So I'm going to label this. Here's the mouth. This as the salivary gland. So if you remember, that makes the saliva, which has the salivary amylase in it, which breaks down starch into maltose at a pH of 7. We've got this here is the esophagus. This is the stomach. We've got this as the small intestine, which is also right here. And here's the large intestine. And over here is the anus. There are a couple other, so this is the pathway that food travels through as it goes through your digestive system. Through the mouth, the esophagus, through the stomach, through the small intestine, the large intestine, and out. Or undigested, unabsorbed materials go out the anus. But there are a few other structures on here that you need to know. This is the liver and the gallbladder. And here's the pancreas. Note that I've clearly shown the connections between the gallbladder, liver, pancreas, and small intestines. The liver and the gallbladder share a duct right here. The gallbladder stores the bile that's made by the liver, which goes down through this duct. This duct joins the duct that comes from the pancreas. So here the enzymes collect and are dumped into the small intestine as food is coming through the stomach, and it continues to be digested into smaller and smaller monomers, so that the villi and the microvilli in the small intestines can absorb that material into the capillary beds that are waiting within the villi. Okay, so that's that drawing, and I hope that was that's quick, easy. And if you need a minute to draw, go ahead, pause, draw and label, and this is something you can quiz yourself on over and over and over until you get 100% right a couple times. So 6.2, draw and label a diagram of the heart showing the 4 chambers associated with blood vessels, valves, and the route of blood. And you need to show the relative size of thickness of the 4 chambers. So I know we did a box diagram in class. I'm drawing this one, which is slightly different, and then we'll also talk about the box. So let's go and label the different parts. This is the right atrium. This is the right ventricle. This is the left atrium, left ventricle. just so you might remember this. This is not a requirement. This is the vena cava. This is actually the inferior vena cava. This is the superior vena cava. And as blood comes through the vena cava into the right atrium, the blood flows into the right ventricle past this valve right here. And so this is the right atrioventricular valve, also known as the tricuspid valve. Okay? So this blood comes into the right ventricle, and as it gets pumped with this muscle tissue all around it, the blood then goes up this way when the valves close through the pulmonary artery. And note that this is all deoxygenated blood. It goes to the pulmonary, which is headed for the lungs, where gas exchange occurs, bringing back oxygenated blood through these vessels, which we're going to label as the pulmonary veins. And there's this one down here too. Goes into the left atrium, passes by the mitral valve. Oh, by the way, there's a valve here too. It's my fault. There's a valve here. That is called the pulmonary valve. It goes so to the lungs, through the pulmonary veins, to the left atrium, through the mitral valve, to the left ventricle. And then, again, when the left ventricle pumps, the blood travels up here through the aorta and past the aortic valve. And from the aorta it goes to the rest of the body, where the oxygen diffuses into every single cell in your body, so that your cell can use that oxygen as one of the ingredients of cellular respiration, taking up carbon dioxide from the cell, bringing it all the way back through the vena cava into the right atrium, to the right ventricle, through the pulmonary arteries to the lungs to get rid of the carbon dioxide to bring in fresh oxygen, and which then it comes back to the left side of the heart and back out the aorta. So the right side of the heart is deoxygenated, the left side of the heart is oxygenated blood. And there's one other part I want you to know, and that's this muscle right here, which is called the septum. And I want you to notice that the muscle tissue around the left ventricle is thicker than the muscle around the right ventricle, implying increased muscle mass for increased pressure to be sending the blood out the aorta. Okay? So I'm not actually, I just sketched this diagram here. You could write this all out on here if you like. We have that in our notes already, so I'm not going to worry about that. I think that this diagram shows a little bit more detail and maybe it's a little bit better and isn't all that difficult to remember how to draw. So again, this is something you can practice. All right, so the next thing is the ventilation system. Okay. So here's the ventilation system. Let's see what we got here. What color we can use. Okay, so we need to be able to label a few parts here, and let's go and start here at the top. So this is the trachea, and I showed some lines here, which is like the cartilage rings that we saw when we were looking at the sheep pluck. But here's the trachea. And then actually I forgot one part, a very, very important part of this diagram. And that is the lungs. Okay. So we've got the trachea, and the trachea then lead to, pull that line out a little bit more, to the left bronchus and the right bronchus. And they continue to break down into bronchioles. Now note that there are the bronchioles and everything else exists over on the left side as well, but no need to draw that. So we've got the right bronchus, the bronchioles, and at the end here, I drew a circle, and this is the inset diagram. So this here are the alveoli, and these things are meant to be the capillary bed that surrounds the alveolus to increase gas exchange. This, I hope you know, is the right lung. This is the left lung, and that there's a diaphragm that sits down here. Okay? That changes the pressure of the thoracic cavity, thereby increasing the amount of gas that is in there or decreasing it. Okay? So I think that that's pretty straightforward. Okay, and then of the neuron. So I'm going to do this quickly because there's already a video in which I draw this diagram. So let's see. So what we have over here are dendrites. This is just one dendrite, but each of these things coming off. Here's the cell body. Nucleus, which tells us this is a eukaryotic cell. We've got this tube. This is our axon. This is our myelin sheath. The spaces between the myelin sheath are called the nodes of Ranvier. This part just indicates that there's an omitted section of the axon that we just didn't draw, and over here is an axon terminal. Now this is supposed to be a motor neuron, so over here on the end would be an effector or a muscle. Make sure I've got everything here. Yep, those are the parts. So again, you need to be able to explain some of those things though. All right, and then the last thing is draw and label the reproductive systems of males and females. So let's start the beginning of this process where meiosis begins. Here are the testes. This is a side view of the male reproductive system. So here are the testes. You also need to know, yes, good, the epididymis. And then you also need to know the vas deferens. So the sperm start in the testes, they mature in the epididymis, they swim with their flagellum up the vas deferens, past the seminal vesicle, which adds sugars into the solution so that the sperm have something to make ATP from. They pass by the prostate gland, down the ureter, down the urethra, and out the penis. Now notice that the urethra shares a path from the bladder, which has a tube coming in called the ureter that's coming from the kidneys. So the urine is being stored here in the bladder, and it exits the male system the same way as sperm. Okay, so that's the male reproductive system, drawing and labeling it. And then here's the female. So let's start over here on the left. This is the bladder. Know that there would be a tube coming into the bladder. And so this here is the urethra. So it's a different system than over here, the reproductive system. So this here is the ovary. This is the fallopian tube, or also known as the oviduct. This is the uterus, the cervix, and the vagina. Yep, and so that is what you need to know. And those are all the drawings that you need to know for this test. I hope that that was useful to you. And again, all these drawings you can practice on your own. Okay? And use this as a key.